Germany's military planners had long expected that the country's U-boat fleet would play a key role in cutting Britain's supply lines. They could sneak up underwater on British merchant vessels, attacking them at the last moment. The submarines were also extremely agile on the surface. To combat the threat, Britain's merchant fleet was corralled into convoys for protection. But there was a serious shortage of anti-submarine ships to escort them. Many ships sailed without protection. Yet Britain's naval command remained remarkably complacent. They believed they had the weapons and the technology to contain the U-boat threat. It was soon proved wrong. In the early months of the war, Britain's supply lines were harassed and disrupted. Often the U-boats would attack on the surface, picking off merchant ships with their deck guns. In response, the Royal Navy sent aircraft carriers equipped with submarine hunting aircraft to patrol the sea lanes used by the convoys. But they had only limited effect. By the end of 1939, over 100 Allied merchant ships had been sunk by German submarines. If losses continued at this rate, Britain would face disaster. Oil, food, and weapons would all begin to run short. Then things got even more difficult. Germany overran France. Suddenly, the German Navy, which until now had been largely bottled up in the North Sea, had access to France's Atlantic seaboard. They now had a base to attack Britain's Atlantic convoys. France's Atlantic ports filled with newly built German U-boats, particularly the Type 7C ocean-going vessel. Admiral Karl Dönitz, head of the German U-boat service, now organized his submarines into what he called wolf packs. A group would be lined up across a likely convoy route. As soon as one U-boat spotted a convoy, it called in the rest to attack. Sometimes the U-boats were also guided by long-range patrol aircraft. By the end of October 1940, up to 40% of Allied merchant shipping per convoy was being sunk. Britain's supplies were under threat. German U-boat crews called it the Happy Time, and top U-boat commanders became national heroes. Britain was paying dearly for its lack of preparation. But finally, things began to change. A crash-building program of anti-submarine escort vessels was producing results. The first corvettes, as they were known, were coming off the slipways. For the first time, Britain could set up permanent groups of warships to escort the supply convoys. But their effectiveness was limited by the fact that their top speed was 15 knots, 2 knots slower than the surface speed of a U-boat. At the same time, the patrol aircraft of Britain's coastal command were equipped with depth charges. They lacked the range to cover the mid-Atlantic, but U-boats on the surface near their bases could be harried and forced to submerge. Then, as in the bombing campaigns, it was a series of technological breakthroughs that really came to Britain's help. In early 1940, a new type of radar, known as centimetric radar, was developed. It was smaller than existing systems and, for the first time, could be fitted to escort ships and aircraft. Now, any German U-boat on the surface was vulnerable. Some months later, there was a second technological breakthrough. Huff-Duff was a radio detector. Anytime a German U-boat surfaced to communicate, Huff-Duff could pick up the radio signal and pinpoint its exact position. Steadily, during the spring of 1941, Britain began to contain the U-boat threat. Merchant shipping losses fell by more than half. In early March, Gunther Prien, one of Germany's top U-boat commanders, failed to return from a patrol. Shortly afterwards, 2 more top German U-boat commanders lost their lives in quick succession. Then Germany suffered a major disaster that would reverberate through the rest of the war. In May 1941, the British destroyer Bulldog forced U-110 to the surface and captured the submarine. On board was an Enigma machine, used for encoding German signals. More importantly, Bulldog also captured the naval code books that went with the machine. It would provide vital assistance to Britain's code breakers. Soon, unbeknown to the Germans, Britain was getting a real insight into German naval communications. For the Royal Navy, it meant convoys could now be routed away from the U-boat wolf packs. Germany's submarines had to work harder and search further to find and sink their prey. Yet, despite the Allied gains, by the winter of 1941, the German war machine was producing ever greater numbers of U-boats. The long-term outlook for Britain's supply routes still looked ominous. Then, in December 1941, the war at sea changed decisively.